Ma'am, what happened? I cut myself, sir. How? He took her by the hand he took her hand by the wrist from out of the running water and looked at it. Blood trickled from the slice, mixing with water in her palm. How? He asked. Scissors, upstairs, she said. It hurts, may I? Mark said nothing, but let her have her hand back. He looked at her. He moved back into the living room. 2 more men had come to stand outside in the doorway. Mark circled and looked up and around, sniffing. Not many houses around here. No, said John. Good ways out? Yes. And there are some families. He paused, waiting for a response. Yes, son. But not close. No, John said. Mark Richards circled back into the kitchen. I smell pop, he said. No one said anything. What is your name? Mark Richards asked Linda. Linda. You cut your hand? Yes, it hurts. I need to take care of it. Sit tight, he said, holding his hand up and signaling. Everett checked the house. Thomas checked the back. He crossed his arms on his chest. You. What is your name again? John Casey. Grab a couple chairs, John. John did not move instantly. From the kitchen, Mark Richards said, pointing to them. John went and got 2 chairs and set them in the center of the room, side by side. Blood drops from before were drying between the legs of one of the chairs. Linda moved to his side in the center of their living room, holding her hand wrapped tight in a white towel that was turning red. They stood there together, looking at Mark Richards. Clear, Everett called down from the top of the stairs. Sit, Mark Richards said. They sat. He put his arm over her shoulder and she leaned into him. Clear, Thomas called in from the back porch. Has anything happened tonight that you have not told me about? No, John said. Linda winced from her hand. No, John repeated. Mark Richards circled them, looking around. Everett came down the stairs and stood beside Mark Richards. There is blood on the stairs in the bathroom upstairs. Mark Richards stopped pacing. There's blood all over the house. How did you cut your hand? I cut it in the kitchen, went upstairs to the bathroom for the first aid kit, could not find it, came back down. Blood was dripping off my hand onto the floor. She lowered her voice but continued speaking. It's our home. I know that, ma'am. I know that this is your home. And I know that what I'm looking for may or may not be contained by you within your home. There is nothing here, John said. Mark Richards looked at him. Thomas and Everett came in to stand so that the 3 made a circle around the 2 in their chairs. You said she cut her hand upstairs. She says she cut her hand downstairs. Which is it? Downstairs, Linda shouted. There's nothing here, John repeated quietly. Nothing here, Mark Richards said, looking strongly at John. He walked over and picked up Linda's hurt hand by the wrist. There's nothing here, he said. John said nothing, but he met Mark Richards' gaze. Mark Richards twisted her hand and she gasped. Nothing here? She began to cry. Nothing here? He pressed on her cut with his thumb. It began to bleed again. She opened her mouth but did not let any sound out. Nothing here? Mark Richards asked, glaring at John. John inhaled and exhaled deeply, seeing the tears run down his wife's face. Nothing but my wife and I, he said, and folded his hands in his lap, lowering his head. Leave us. Mark Richards stopped. He released her hand. He looked at his 2 henchmen, nodded, and they exited. Mark Richards bent down and met John's face while he sat. If I find you have lied, he sniffed, and you have withheld information from me. He looked left and right and smelled again. It is my business and my pleasure taking things personally. He looked at John, and I'll remember. John said nothing. He heard Linda cry a little. Mark stood tall and paused there, before them, in black. He was broad like an American football player. His hands were heavy. He waited a moment. No one said anything. He turned and walked out, leaving the door open. John and Linda sat until they heard the car leave the drive. They watched it exit out on the far side of the hill. She cried and leaned into John. He held her and breathed. After a long moment, assuring their departure, John stood and Linda went to the sink to run her hand again. He went out the back door, leaving the sliding glass open, walked over to the bunker, opened the heavy door lid, and called into the darkness. Mr. Jake, they've gone. They've gone? They've gone. Is Linda safe? Yes, we are both okay. Good. Jake breathed, and John could hear him sigh. That's good. The depth in his sigh was foreign to John, having never seen war. That is the end of part 19. 20 is the last chapter. And as I said in the beginning, the book is non-chronological, but it's built like a ladder getting you to the last chapter. That is the segment right before the last chapter. That has been called in the style. This is a book that's written in the style of Ernest Hemingway's In Our Time. As that book was for its time in the 1920s, this book is for our time, which is today, right now, and all moments preceding, forthcoming. But that story has been called, in my comparison to Hemingway's writing, like mine, The Killers, which is Hemingway's most brutal story. So, the story I just read you is The Killers. And I know it's pretty intense. I know it was interesting. I was thinking, man, I was asking myself what parts to read you today. And the poetry was really important, some of the vignettes which I've read to you, but it's like, what to read? And that one was like, boom, The Spectral Night. I was like, okay. That's the one for you, so. Is there any questions? Would anyone like me to read a little bit of the final chapter? Is there any comments?
You got this poster here?
Yeah, and I want to say, that poster is pretty much awesome. Thank you so much for everyone on my team that pulled together. That poster is now, when I saw it, it's like...
Who made the poster?
That guy right there. Yeah.
Well, can you explain those words?
For the Earth and its converse?
Yes.
Well, the final chapter is about its converse, the Earth's converse. And that's the whole point. That's what the book gets to. The book is very... It's heavy, it's terse, it's of the Earth, which is a very heavy place. The matter here is dense. We vibrate a pretty heavy frequency. This is the dimension of physicality and weight. So everything precursing to the final chapter is pretty weighty. It's very literary. It's like modern literature, and it's modern literature as modern literature comes. It's written to be just that in every classical sense you can imagine. Every word has been looked at like 10,000 times. So, it's like that for a reason. The last chapter. So, first, the latter is for the Earth. Its converse is the last chapter. And that's for you to make of it what you will. And thank you all so much for the support. I mean, this book it's awesome. I mean,
Will there be any more? Is there a sequel?
Yeah, well, okay, so the concepts I idealized or conceptualized in this book, I have a second good book coming. It's called A World Without Lines. That's going to be probably a little bit longer. It's going to be straight up novel style. This is actually technically a novel because it's 1 through 20 chapters, but it's also a compilation of short stories that can be taken on its own. That's the thing about this book and its stylization. Many of the stories have individual names, and those are all, they're all independent. The next book is going to be just one story. It's a novel. It goes straight through. It's 350 pages or something. We're working on that one, but that's in the works. It's really, really cool though, and I think yeah.
Does that have anything to do with that one? I mean, is it...
No, not necessarily, but you will find seams as Faulkner created his own county in Tennessee, or Mississippi probably, which is Mississippi. Yeah, Faulkner created this world, his own county in Mississippi. You will find seams of the Can family drawn throughout all of Martin Can's works. So. Thank you all so much for coming.
I've got a couple of questions.
Oh, hit me.
They're
Bring it on.
over here.
What's up?
Okay, so,